Hello, welcome to ITI VPAT training, Module 2, preparing to write the Accessibility Conformance Report, ACR. This is the Module 2 in a series of 8 trainings, so if you haven't taken the introduction, I would suggest you go back and listen to that one first. All of these will be available and recorded for viewing at later times or at your leisure. So before we begin, I'd also like to introduce the co-host for this session, Robert Paxman.
Yes, hi, Robert Paxman, and work with Intel on accessibility, security, and wireless. Thank you.
So my name is Sam Ogami. I work for HP. I'm a program manager for the Office of Aging and Accessibility. In this module, we will cover when the ACR enters into the design, development, and procurement process, who should write the ACR, and what sections to fill out. Accessibility needs to be considered throughout the product development lifecycle. For ACRs, they should be completed after the design, development, testing, and documentation part of the product have been completed. Ideally, ACRs should be authored right before release so that it provides the most relevant and most accurate information about that release product. Who should write the ACR? The ACR should be written by people involved in the product development, people who have access to the accessibility testing results, people who understand and know accessibility. The ACR is a technical document and not marketing document, so it needs to be fact-based. You then need to determine what your product includes. These sections include documentation, support services, hardware, software, third-party products, included in your products, excuse me. How to address third-party products? An example of third-party products could be something that's open source or a platform that you're running on that you're dependent on. How to address them in your ACR depends on how that third-party product is incorporated into the product that you're reporting on. If the user can't determine that it's totally separate product, test for the accessibility of that third-party product and cover it in the ACR. If it can be determined that it is that the third-party product is a separate product, note that in the ACR, and if possible, provide a URL or where to find accessibility information about that third-party product. There are minimum requirements that must be completed for all ACRs, and the first category of those is basic information about the product. This includes the name of the product, the version number, the date of when the ACR was completed, a product description, contact information, and this is very important, so if any questions or follow-up information is needed as a result of someone looking at the ACR, they can contact the appropriate person within the company. Evaluation method used. Next category is applicable standards and guidelines. This will cover what standards are included in this ACR, the terms, and then tables, and these will be as applicable. So the WCAG 2X, Section 508, and EN 301-549. Additional optional sections of the ACR that could be included are branding headers. If there are changes, to report the date changes, additional notes, more information on the evaluation methods that were used, any types of additional remarks and explanations, and a legal disclaimer. The next part of the ACR that we'll look into is answering the technical criteria. So there's tables for WCAG, Section 508, and EN 301-549 listed in the technical criteria to be evaluated. So for each of these criteria, there will be a conformance level and a remarks and explanations section that the report author needs to fill out. The terms section will define what conformance level is used, and I will cover that in the next slide. The remarks and explanation section in the table include information regarding what tested, the testing that was given for the criteria, information on applicable dependencies to support the accessibility, like OS, app frameworks, browsers that were recommended, how the customer can find more information about accessibility issues, and if there are known workarounds for accessibility issues within the product. Those should also be listed in this section. There are 5 different conformance levels. There's supports, partially supports, does not support, not applicable, and not evaluated. In the ACR, it should be included the terms and the definitions for them, and I will read the definitions now for each of them. So for supports, it's the functionality of the product has at least one method that meets the criteria without known defects or meets with equivalent facilitation. Partially supports is some functionality of the product does not meet the criteria. Does not support means the majority of the functionality of the product does not meet the criteria. Not applicable means that the criteria is not relevant to the product. Not evaluated can only be used in one circumstance, and that's for the WCAG 2X level AAA. All other places it's required to put one of the first 4 supports, partially supports, does not support, or not applicable for the given criteria. So welcome questions and feedback. You can send them to info@itic.org or contact by phone 1-202-737-8888. We'd like to thank ITI and its members, HP, IBM, Intel, Lexmark, Oracle, and VMware for their contributions to this training. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
There are no questions showing up in the chat or the Q&A.
Awesome.